podcast listeners. You can find Slice of the Paranormal everywhere podcasts are found, or you can watch us on our YouTube channel.
Hi, hello, and welcome to the podcast. This is Slice of the Paranormal, and I'm Ryan. These are my friends Steve and Christy.
Hello.
And we're here to talk about some paranormal stuff.
That's right.
I guess, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. And maybe a little bit about the nude, headless, 6-bullet hole coal region suicide.
Oh,
Okay.
we could talk about that.
Yeah.
But I saw you
pretty
brought
good.
this, and I kind of want to talk about this first.
Yeah, what is that?
All right. Since this is our, fourth episode, I figured I'd bring Chartreuse, which is an elixir for life.
Now, so everybody's heard of this, obviously.
That's made by monks in Chernobyl, France.
I'll take some of that, yeah.
And every time one of my friends passes away, I always whip out this bottle and have people try Chartreuse. Because it's supposedly an elixir for life. It's started out as an alchemical recipe.
And one for our producer.
Yeah. And the monks have decided to stop making it so much because they have a problem praying. So they're no longer shipping it out of France. So I figured I'd bring it here because it's $200 a bottle to get, and I had to buy as many as I could in Pennsylvania before they stopped being available. So cheers. May you all have long life.
Cheers.
I'm really scared. No, it's not so bad.
No,
No.
not as bad as I was thinking.
It's 110 proof. There is a yellow version, which is weaker, and that's, I think, 80 proof.
And what's the more expensive version?
The more expensive version is called the VEP version, and that is sold in liters, and it comes in a wooden crate. And I have that version at home as well, and that's a $400 bottle.
Wow.
So I bring the cheap $200 bottle around.
Yeah.
We're okay with that. Well, thanks for sharing. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've never
problem.
had Chartreuse before.
Oh, I'm glad. It's very. I tell people it's kind of like drinking an herb garden or lawn clippings.
Yeah.
It's definitely got some botanicals going on.
Some earthiness.
It's got like 130 things in it, and
It's very smooth for making my lips feel like this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I used to drink it like half a bottle in a night. Back when it was only $75.
Oh.
Like out.
But today we're here to talk about the 6-bullet hole coal mining region suicide.
That's a fancy way of saying it.
Well, they had a dark sense of humor back in 1904.
Where are we?
We are in the region outside of Shamokin, Pennsylvania, which is in Northumberland County, PA, about the center of the state.
Okay.
For anyone that doesn't know. Hickory Ridge Colliery was along Hickory Ridge, and that's north of Coltmont, near,
This is all coal region area.
Coal region area. It's Marion Heights. It's Natalie. So on November 19th, some hunters were going by the colliery, and they found a headless body about 100 yards away from
Dun, dun, dun.
the colliery. So, of course, everyone assumes it's a miner, but the headless body has 6 bullet holes in it and no head. So
Was the head
no body.
cleanly cut off, or
It
was
was
it
just the body.
ripped off?
Oh, it was
Could they
just the
tell?
body.
it was just the body. The head was cut off pretty cleanly.
Okay.
So, I don't know
Creepy.
if a saw or an axe.
Yeah.
But back then, they didn't have like DNA sequencing and all this stuff. So if you didn't have a head, you didn't have a way to identify the person.
Right.
It's just a naked guy. So in this area, they find the body.
With no head.
So the cops come out, they get the body, and the body is actually pretty buried relatively quickly. And they figure out, they're like, well, we don't know who this guy is. We have no way of figuring out who this guy is without a head. So they put out an award. If you you could find the head. You would win a $50 reward for finding the head.
Okay.
And if you found the murderer, they would have given you a $200 reward. So in 1904, this is quite a bit of cash.
To find a head.
To find a head. So they ultimately...
Be on the lookout for a head.
Like a week later, 2 boys or 3 boys, depending on the article you read, find the head through the help of their dog. The head is hidden under a pile of rocks, and it's wrapped in its shirt, which is a red undershirt, and a slouch hat, and it's all tied together with some clothesline. So
like a nice little package, like a head package.
Yes, like a nice...
Like a picnic lunch.
Like a little lunch, yes. So we have the head. So I brought something here.
What's in the box?
What's in that box?
Well...
What's in the box?
What's in the box?
I figured today we needed to have a prop. So I created my version
Oh, man.
Oh, good Lord.
of the Shamokin Head.
Ooh-wee.
So
That is quite something.
he has a very pronounced sharp-ridged nose, a mustache, dark black hair, and this is roughly what they found.
He has a vision.
What did you make it out of?
It's made out of oven-baked clay. So
Nice job.
Very nicely done.
So I made this, and when they checked out the clothing had New York labels. So this is a time period where a lot of your clothing was made by small clothier makers,
yeah.
you know. So you would have a label to where maybe this guy was from. So they thought maybe he was from New York.
Sure, kind of places.
So in Shamokin fashion, what do? You now have a head, but you still don't know who he is. So they take him to Farrow's funeral home in Shamokin.
Which is still there now, right?
It is still there. In
Right.
fact, we went and saw it.
Yeah.
Farrow's was one of 6 places that actually could embalm and preserve the head. So Farrow's embalms and preserves the head at a time when very few people were doing it. And they put it in the window of the shop and let the townspeople walk by the head and see if anyone knows who it is. And that was, I think, on December 3rd of 1904 is when they're all walking by Farrow's funeral home to see if
To
anyone
gaze at the head
to gaze at the
in the
severed
window.
head. So, like, everyone walks by, they gawk at this thing, and no one knows who the heck he is. Now, after a few years, the head was stored in the basement of Farrow's funeral home, where it kind of just stayed. In fact, for many years, like, it was a test of courage if you were a young boy to knock on Farrow's door and ask to see the head. So young boys and girls would go to there and check out the head and maybe touch the head or stare in its hollow eyes, you know. So, but then you fast forward to the
Just like every kid's dream.
Right.
Mommy,
We could see the head.
can we see the head again?
Hey, I'd do the same thing. You know?
You would, but that is you, yeah. I don't,
But that is you.
I don't know if that'd been me.
I'm the guy that told my friend Colby, I'm like, hey, let's go down to Reading. You know, there's a dead guy, and they're going to bury him at the end of the week. Let's go.
Let's go see him.
You know, we have a few minutes.
As long as you're not the guy that says, hey, there's a whale in this next state over. Let's go cut its head off.
Yeah, no. I've never put a whale on the top of my car or anything
Good deal.
like that.
Okay.
So in the 1930s, what happens is there's this guy that up in New York that is on his deathbed, and he gives a deathbed confession. He says he was hired by the Black Hand, which was an organized crime unit back then, and he said he admitted killing a man in the coal region and cutting off his head. And
Yeah, but that could have been anyone.
in the oddity of this time period is this is an immigrant, so no one really cares. So this guy's name was never written down. No one ever thought, hey, let's check this out.
Yeah.
So
Not a lot of checks and balances at that time.
no. So it stays at Farrow's funeral home for a number of years. In fact, it gets to 1976, and the freaking head is still in Farrow's. And it's there.
Still in the window?
No, they put it in the basement. And it's there
Okay.
for the most part. But according to Mal Farrow, the guy that owns it now, he has said that there was many times that this head might have gone out of the funeral home for a little jaunt and bar hopping or something in the town of Shamokin.
When was this?
That does not surprise me.
It would be anywhere from 1904 to 1976.
Oh, so good.
So
Good chunk of time there.
So there's a good
Middle.
chunk of time that this head had many journeys that many people
What that
today
head has seen.
don't want to talk about. So,
What do you mean?
well, I've heard rumors that he may have been to bars. He may have been rolled down.
I've heard that.
Bars down there. And in fact, by the time he gets buried later on,
Rolled down.
he's actually lost an ear or two.
Did he go bowling? Is that why he lost it too?
At least at the bar, I think he did. So I guess the 1976, and Farrow's is like, we kind of don't need this anymore. And a guy named Mooch Kashner was the president.
Good old Mooch.
Yeah, he's a famous miner locally. And like a lot of our stories that we're going to talk about in future episodes are going to come back to Mooch.
Mm-hmm.
He's connected to so much.
Okay.
So, like, I'm going to always talk about
mention
Mooch.
his name multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in fact, we have a picture of Mooch. I have. Sorry. And Mooch just was a miner's miner. All the local miners knew who Mooch was, and if they wanted an expert, they contacted this guy. So Mooch collected all this miner stuff, and he had an Anthracite Heritage Museum in Shamokin. And what Farrow's decided was, hey, let's give him the head. They're a
Makes
miner's
sense.
museum. This is a dead miner that we have, and we don't really want to keep answering the door for kids to see the dead miner's head. So
Was it mostly kids? Is that what you're telling me?
I bet there was adults too.
Okay.
Kids and adults who wanted to take it to the bar, apparently.
So he gets the head. He takes it to the Farrow, to the Anthracite Heritage Museum, and they put it under a glass case and they cover it with a black cloth. So if you walk in and you got a strong stomach and you want to see the head,
Okay.
that you could lift the cloth and see the head.
But anyone unassuming wouldn't even know it was there.
Most people would not. In fact, it would have stayed there till today unless there was one person. There's a picture of the judge that walks in and sees this head. I don't know if I have his name. Wait.
I don't know if I have a picture of that.
Well, anyway, there's a judge that comes in, and
there he is.
He sees this head, and he's like, "This is horrible, guys. You can't display this in the museum."
Yeah, a little disrespectful.
So he's like,
Dude, we've been doing this for like 80 years.
So he's like, you got to get rid of this. We're going to have to bury it. And lots of legal action starts happening. So that's when the head goes missing. Now, before, then we get to the ghost stories.
Wait, what year are we at now?
We are in 1977.
Okay.
So I was 2 years old when the head goes missing. So the ghost stories are in around the early turn of the century, around 1904. The local ghost story is teens would talk of a headless horseman that would ride near the old mine shafts on the back roads near Coltmont and Natalie and Marion Heights. And it was assumed because this guy died up there,
Missing a
that
head.
this is the guy missing the head, so he's the headless horseman.
I like it.
So we might have a headless horseman story here.
Okay.
Now, in Marion Heights, which is in between Coltmont and Natalie,
So not far from that area.
not far from that area. I mean, that's all like most of these people worked in the same mines.
Okay.
So a lot of them knew each other. But on January 18th, 1909, the edition of the Gettysburg Times reported that residents of Marion Heights were disturbed by flashing lights near the headless man, where the headless man was murdered, thinking it to be the ghost of the headless man. So we have stories of, lights in the woods by the Hickory Ridge Colliery, and we have the headless horseman running around. So this close to October.
Definite paranormal
Yeah.
activity around it.
Yeah, I'm pretty thrilled about
Well, and
that.
just miners in general and all that mining stuff he collected.
Now, do we have is our guest here yet?
Yep.
I believe so.
You want to come on in?
Dave, come on in.
Perfect.
Guys,
Hey,
We have a
welcome,
special
Dave.
guest for you today.
Now, Dave, I just...
Wait, do you want to introduce him?
Yeah, I'm going to introduce Dave. Dave, I came across because he had written a story called The Mystery of the Shamokin Head. And I was like, okay, I gotta meet this guy because not many people
There
know
it
about
is.
the
Oh,
Shamokin
wow.
Head. All right. So can you tell us what drew you into the Shamokin Head story?
Well, it's a story that I heard from when I was young from my grandmother.
Okay.
And it always kind of changed. I always thought it was made up.
Are you from Shamokin
I'm
then?
born and raised Shamokin.
Okay. Perfect.
I always thought that it was made up because it was like, oh, I saw the head there, or it was over there, or it was over there, and couldn't quite get the details.
Okay. Every story
100%.
had a little bit of
Yeah, something changed a little
little
bit.
gray going on.
And then it was later in life that I found out. Actually, a friend of mine, Jim, he made a short film that's available on YouTube called The Head.
Okay.
And,
Yep, we watched that.
And it's based off the story of the head, but it's kind of updated story with some people looking for it now. And that kind of reignited my fire of like, oh, this is a real story that really happened. Flash forward to last year, I wrote this short story. It rhymes. I always wanted to
Oh my
illustrate a book.
goodness.
That's awesome.
And I couldn't find anybody to write it, so I just decided to write it myself. So it released last October 13th, Friday the 13th.
That's awesome.
Nice.
And it's had some pretty successful, lots of people have been interested in it.
Children's book about a severed head.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, not something you would normally think would go together, but
No, I wanted to make it fun. I thought the story was weird. And I mean, I was a kid when I knew of the story. So,
Yeah.
just kind of, I would say that I learned a lot more about the head since I wrote the book. So
Interesting.
there's probably a little bit of, I guess, movie magic in some of the details of the story.
Makes sense.
The one thing that I was always understanding was that they found the head and his lips and his eyes were stitched shut.
Oh yeah, I think I heard that too. Doesn't it even look that way in the picture?
No,
little bit?
it's
No, in fact, there's a
100% not.
picture out there, which actually you helped me
Right.
track down, because there was a coffee shop in Shamokin that actually had the head, and that
Picture of the
was
head.
what's
It was
Kathy.
That was actually Mooch's granddaughter, Kathy, owned the building at the time. She had a little museum in the coffee shop, and there was a picture of the head and an article about Mooch, because Mooch was, I think, one of the last people to see the head above ground.
Okay. So someone had snapped a picture sooner somewhere.
Well, I think they were actually, because what I found out since then is the photos were taken by Farrows. They had a left profile, right profile, and a front.
Yeah, that's
And it was one of those photos from Farrows was what was hanging in the coffee shop.
okay.
Because that's what I used. Since I wrote this book, it kind of reignited some interest in the story. And my friend Matt just released last weekend a short film that will be available on YouTube soon about what happened to the head when it went missing from the museum in the 70s.
Awesome. That was just last week, right?
That was just last week.
Yeah, and I went there, and that's one thing I wanted to talk about is like the fact that it goes missing, and for decades, no one knew what the heck happened to it. So this film, like, I highly, suggest people to go look it up. It's going to be on the Shamokin history page when they release it, maybe 2 weeks, something like that.
Yeah, he said he's working on getting it released. So
Well, we won't be released by that time, so we'll link it in the comments or in the we'll link it
Exactly. But I can say that the head was, kind of given to an artist, and the artist explains that whole process of getting this head.
An artist.
Yes, his goal was to make a cast of the head before they turned it in, and it got buried. So I'm not going to divulge too much information because I think I want you to watch this film.
Sure.
To hear it from Chet's own words, what had happened with the head and who was instrumental in stealing it, essentially.
so it's kind of like a little conspiracy almost. I'm hearing
Little bit,
like a little secret
it's a
activity. And
wild story. You would never guess where the head was at and where it wound up in those couple weeks that it was
Awesome.
missing before it was turned over. Just the story in general. I talked to Matt about this. It's a wild story at the face because it's this 120-year-old mystery that was never solved.
Right.
Never solved at the time. There's still no names. I mean, there was one name that I saw published in a news article, and Steve and I actually talked about it. And
Which one's that?
Antonio Sorelli.
Right.
He was there for a wedding, and no one knew what happened to him. But 6 months later, the newspapers talked about it, and he was found safe in Italy. He was a customs officer, so that's why I thought criminals might have wanted it off him.
Mm-hmm. So this body you talked up front about, what was that? That same person? Is that his?
That's his body, but they buried that in one cemetery, and then when the head is finally turned in to the local justices, it is buried in a pauper's grave, and only a few people know.
Right.
Wait, what's pauper's grave? Is that like a...
For poor people.
So cheap, no headstone?
No headstone.
Stick or something, maybe?
No,
I
nothing.
don't even think a stick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not even a stick?
You just get a hole.
Well, they didn't want people to dig them up because some of the people that were there said that if they knew where it was, they would have redug it up.
Well, and that's part of it, too. Like, where it's at now is supposed to be a mystery.
It's supposed to be a mystery. Yeah. I mean, my goal, I think it'd be great if they could dig it up and, like, 23andMe it and do a DNA test, and see who this guy was.
Yeah.
And do you guys know where it's at?
I have a general idea.
Yeah.
If I knew where it was at, I would have a real
Can
head
you
here.
disclose the general idea?
In Cole Township off of Treverton Road.
Okay. My parents, my whole family's from Shamokin. So my parents moved to Sunbury when they were first married. So I have a lot of knowledge of Shamokin, but they had never heard of the Shamokin Head, and I was really surprised.
That's the wild thing too that I found from the book is there's a lot of people who that are older that have seen the head. I mean, plenty of people have come up to me. I've gotten phone calls from people wanting to tell me their story about the head.
Right.
And then there's also a whole another group of people the same age as those folks who never heard of it.
Yeah.
There's a handful of people that are like my age that never heard of it, but there's a couple that did too. And it just is such an appealing story, overall. Because
it is.
It's a wild mystery. Then the fact that it literally was in the basement of a funeral home for like 70 years.
Yeah.
And it is one of the first things that we actually started talking about when we were like coming down with
for sure.
actual ideas for the podcast. And I remember you mentioned this Shamokin Head. For me, I was like, oh, that piqued my interest because my whole family's from Shamokin. And to hear that this head was just floating around the city for all those years, it was very, very interesting, very intriguing.
Weirder than that is when
kind of funny.
We were first talking about this podcast. I came in here to look for, production,
Right.
and you were here that day.
I was,
Dave,
yeah.
You were here that day. I didn't know.
I think you were leaving as I was coming back.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we proceeded to talk. And the next time I came in here, Chad showed me. He said, "What are some of the episodes you're thinking about doing?" And I said, "Well, one of the ones we just talked about was the Shamokin Head." And he's like, we have the book right here. I was like, this is kismet. It's made to be. So we knew we had to come in here.
And then I was actually here when you guys met with Chad.
That's right.
And like the pre-production of the podcast. And Steve's like, yeah, we've talked before. And I'm like, we have? And he's like, yeah, through Facebook. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, we have.
Got to put a face with a name.
Yeah, it was crazy because just a couple weeks before I found out about you and your book, I was talking with Matt Lake. He's famous for writing a lot of weird books. He did Weird Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And one of the things that Matt had lamented to me was that he'd never seen a picture of the head. And on the phone, we were talking, and we're like, I can't believe this head was above ground for 70-some years, and no one took a freaking picture. And then when I got the picture from Kathy, Mooch's granddaughter, because of you, the first thing I did was I get on my Facebook, and I just text. Without saying anything, I just texted straight to Matt Lake, and his response is like, "Whoa!" You kind of got to warn somebody when you're going to send them a severed head image. But I was
probably should.
I did send something. I said, "Hey, your 20-year search for the head is over. I've located a picture finally."
It's wild because I have that picture hanging in my basement wall because for Matt's movie, I had to make a replica head.
Yeah.
And I only had the one picture at the time of I think it was the left side. And I have that hanging in my basement where I sculpted the head, and it's still hanging up down there.
Picture of a head in your basement?
Yeah.
It's better than an actual head, can I tell you?
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that our heads had in common is that it has a mustache and the hair, but neither of us tried to do. He actually had a mustache that kind of went down and connected up by the ears. So
Like a Chester A.
yeah.
Arthur kind of deal, or
Yeah, he had a unique
Guys.
cut, which I'm sure in 1904 was probably normal.
Right.
yeah, it's probably all the rape.
Yeah, it was probably the cool thing to wear your hair. You know.
But that led me down to a rabbit hole. I mean, I have a whole little notebook here of notes of research that I did. Just some of the stuff you're reading too. Just trying to figure out who it belonged to, and I actually talked to one person who does some like history research because at one point somebody admitted to the murder too at the time.
Oh,
And it turns out that it wasn't the
they were
person
just trying to get some fame or
well,
something.
I think maybe he had some mental issues and admitted to something he didn't really do. But the newspaper records at the time, it was listed as an admission at one name, but when it cleared him a couple days later, it used a different name. So I'm not even sure. It was the same last name, but
Okay.
the first name was different. So it was tough tracking any of that
Interesting.
information.
You said you've learned more since you've done the book. That means probably the same as us. Once we talk about what we're doing, people wanted to share all their stories with you.
Right. I mean, I had a long conversation with the former police officer.
That's cool.
Yeah, who was talking about like some of his theories and sort of his family's involvement with getting the museum up, and
Yeah, because he could have some different information.
yeah, for sure.
That's cool.
Yeah, I think the main theory on who this guy ultimately was they think he was like an itinerant peddler, someone that would go from mine patch to mine patch town,
Okay.
selling basic wares, and that would explain why no one knew who the heck he was. No one would have recognized him, and it would also be a reason why random people would want to kill him. If you have a peddler coming in, that guy probably has money. So they might kill them for whatever money they're carrying or whatever goods they're carrying.
If he's a peddler, you might have a ghost, and therefore it could be the headless ghost.
Yeah, there are other peddlers with ghost stories attached. So at some point in the future, we'll do an episode on the peddler's grave, and I'll tell you more
Okay.
about that.
The other wild thing too is in my research, that stretch of road was particularly rough for robberies and things like that as well, where there were some documented cases of like people on horse and carriage getting
Okay.
robbed by people at knife point.
Yeah, and probably killed.
I think the one case that I found they didn't,
Okay.
but they never found out who actually committed the crime. But just the fact that it was at knife point too, it clearly, all the records say that whoever beheaded this poor guy used like surgeon-like precision to remove
Yeah,
the
had
head.
some
Yeah.
kind of blade or.
Yeah.
And he's not wrong, like with how dangerous this area was. To give you an idea, in the last 15 years around this time period in 1904, 97 murders happened in the region, and only 5 people were brought to justice.
Wow.
And by 1908, that number had risen to 118 murders.
Well, and the whole region was a different time because you had so many people coming in from different places,
Right.
and they all settled in different communities in town, and
Can't govern that.
well, right, and if they really didn't care if the police were Irish, they didn't really care if
Yeah.
an Italian got murdered
Take
or
care of your own.
Now, were
That's
the
about
Molly
it.
McGuires around during this time?
The Molly McGuires are still we're still around that that time, but the theory is that the Molly McGuires would have had no reason to have a problem with an Italian, because like you said, that they didn't interact very much. Like a lot of the Irish really hated the Welsh because they had all the mine foreman jobs, and they didn't kind of let the Irish move up in the ranks
Right.
at the mines. So the Welsh and the Irish, they weren't friends.
They didn't get along.
They didn't get along. They had their own bars, type deal.
But they think the peddler was Italian.
Oh, and did you want to try?
I'm fine, thanks.
Okay.
Sorry, we just helped ourselves.
We
Steven.
beat you to it.
Hey, that's why I brought it. I really don't drink that much anymore. That's why I wanted to bring it here for all my friends.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. A little elixir of life.
Exactly. Hopefully you all have long lives from this.
You too.
So I want to thank you, Dave, for coming.
Thanks for having me. No, I mean I will talk about the Shamokin Head to anybody who will listen.
And if one of our viewers want to buy your book, how do they go about doing that?
We can link it in there
Yeah,
too. Is it on Amazon?
It's on Amazon. I also have a website, the mysteryoftheshamokinhead.com, which will
Perfect.
redirect you there. But
Can I see
We'll put
your
both of
Sure.
real quick? I haven't
yeah,
actually had a chance to look at
I
it.
brought the book with us when we went to check out Farrow's funeral home and all that.
Yeah.
Because I've done like the tours of the Shamokin Head. So I've hit up St. Mary's Cemetery,
Right.
which is where supposedly the body's at.
Yep.
You know, we know that the body was buried in St. Mary's Cemetery, but even that, it's like, it's not marked. There's no way to find where the trunk of the body is.
Oh, and back to something you said in the beginning. You said it was a suicide?
Oh, that was just a joke because of him
They
being.
called it a suicide?
Yeah, that was the running joke of Shamokin. Was he was a the nude, headless, 6 bullet hole coal mining region suicide. You know,
Yeah.
like he did it himself. You know,
Of course.
it was probably a joke brought up by the Welsh.
Hey, Dave, you ever have James's Pizza?
I do. Yeah, all the time.
That's
great.
where we went when we were there,
Yeah.
and we gave it some pretty good reviews.
Yeah, they are one of the best in town for sure.
It's and you can attest to this. It's a local favorite, and it is a different kind of pizza.
It is.
It's square, I think, is part of it, right?
American cheese.
American cheese. It's like thinner, crispier crunch. It's interesting.
I can eat a pile of that.
Yeah, we have some pretty good. Steve actually gave it a huge rating, 4.5 for Steve. You said 4.5 out of 5. You said the cheese was the highlight. Very unique cheese blend. Cheese went
Yeah.
all the way to the crust, which we love, and the crust was perfect. So
Oh yeah, nothing, no negatives there.
Did you just have the regular cheese or the hot cheese?
we did a little bit
We
of
had both. Yeah.
So for the review part, we always try to do a regular cheese and pepperoni, just so everything's on the same playing
Right.
field.
But
then
I
we
knew
always
of
try.
said hot cheese and
Yeah.
said, you must try hot cheese pizza. So
You gave 4.75.
yes,
out
I
of 5.
did, which
That's
is
huge.
the highest score I've given to any pizza place so far. And I stand by it. So I took those leftovers
Stand
home.
by my word.
Yeah, I do, man. I took those leftovers home and I ate them for the next 2 days until it was gone, which for me does not happen with pizza.
That's true.
Pizza was surprisingly not greasy, too, which I was very thrilled with.
Yeah, that is
Good
true.
quality cheese.
It was not greasy. The crust had just the right bite to it.
The only downside to it, and it's not the flavor at all, is when I tried to fold it, there was so much cheese and stuff that it would squish out the top.
Yeah,
I don't
Well,
see
the
any
square
downside.
cut.
It's a square
No
cut.
downside to that.
You
No
have to
doubt.
have a technique to fold this stuff.
Yeah.
Still sounds good.
But yeah, I stand by 4.75.
You were worried about the crust, you said, but then said it was good. It had a good toughness. Able to hold the cheese, sauce, and toppings without falling apart. Great flavor on the cheese. Good ratio. No complaints. I was very similar. I did a 4.25 out of 5. Pizza was great. It was not my favorite kind of pizza. Even I just don't like American cheese on pizzas. I don't think that's personally. But I found myself going back for more and more of it. I did have a couple pieces, which again, you know me, that's not normal. Crust was great. We also tried the hot pizza and enjoyed that very much so.
I like the hot cheese with the pepperoni. That's my favorite.
And
there.
probably the thing they missed out is the next day it holds up just as good
Oh, it does.
leftover.
Yeah,
That's what she was saying.
So good.
I could totally see that, especially like an
felt
air
a little
fryer or
bad
something.
that I took all the
But
leftovers.
the thing about James's Pizza, and I think I might have sent that to you under the other email, is I took a picture of Ryan holding a picture in front
yes.
of a picture.
Yes, right.
That's right.
A pitcher because we got a pitcher of beer, I guess.
Picture
Right?
in a picture.
If you go to Shamokin and you try to find James's Pizza, it looks like a regular house. It doesn't
It
look.
blends in.
It blends in. So if you don't know where to go, you might easily miss it. So I will definitely go back. I'll haunt that one.
Oh, I'll hunt that one for
Yeah,
sure.
I would. Yeah, and I don't even like that kind of pizza. Wait, the hot pizza, just real quick. So hot pizza means they're using jack cheese, right?
I don't know what.
That's what they
hot
say.
cheese pizza.
That's
I
what
mean,
they say. Well, you know what? I called another restaurant and asked them, another Shamokin one, which we'll probably review at another time, and they told me it was just pepper jack cheese.
Pepper
but to
jack.
me, it tastes so creamy. I don't know how it can just be
Must be pepper
jack cheese.
and American.
I just went like blind ignorance. I say hot cheese pizza and it tastes good.
It tastes so
It doesn't
good.
matter to me what's in it.
and I eat it.
I have to admit, I think I would get just the hot cheese because it was so good, and it just ramped it up. And the fact that they're also a bar, and that you can get
Right.
booze there. So
Yeah.
if you want pizza, hot pizza,
And it was
beer.
affordable, too. It really
Yeah,
was.
it was really affordable. So
And just to tie it back to the story, Peter Creel, that's the judge's name.
Peter Creel, thank you.
I
Thank
brought
you.
it up, but I couldn't pronounce it. It's
Yeah.
Creole, right? It's
Creel.
yeah.
Yeah.
Creole.
Creole.
He was not very happy that the head was on display.
Yeah.
I would say he's a massive Creole.
But is it
because,
better?
Massive Creole.
Like, I think getting that buried is probably not a good thing. Because nowadays,
That's what I was going to say. Is it like a unmarked grave any better than like...
Yeah, but what if that was like your relative?
Right, I wouldn't want my relative's
well, if it
head
was
being
my
taken to a
relative, he'd been
bar.
on my mantle in my curio cabinet.
Yeah, you'd have it mounted.
The story that part of the reason why I went missing from the museum was because Shamokin was trying to buy time to put together an appeal to go against the judge to be allowed to, and their whole grounds was, the fact that museums have mummies and
like historic
things like that.
Right.
Ultimately, they lost because while the movie talks about like 3 weeks where the head was missing, I think it was it turned over for safekeeping, and it still wasn't interred for a few months after.
Sketchy.
Yeah.
Well, and they had a leg to stand on because the embalming techniques that Farrow's was using back then were untested. So, like, they could have kept it on the grounds of wanting to see how the embalming technique would play out, because that's how Reading, Pennsylvania, kept Stoneman Willie. Stoneman Willie's another story, and that's a guy that, they embalmed in a unique technique in the late 1800s. And the state's like, you got to bury him. And they're like, well, no, wait. We never did this technique before. Why can't we just keep him above ground and watch how well the preserving agent worked?
To be a doctor at that time.
And so they were able to keep it until, I think, a year or two ago is when they buried Stoneman Willie.
Oh, man.
So he was above ground longer than the Shamokin Head. He was at the funeral home for 128 years.
Well, clearly whatever they did worked, because that picture that you have seen, that was taken like in the 60s. So it wasn't
old.
Right after it happened. That was
Preserved somehow.
already 60 some years old.
And if he's like Stoneman Willie,
It's like leather.
he would have been like, if you would have tapped on him, he would have felt hard. It wouldn't have been supple at all. It would have been almost like a
stone.
rock. Yeah.
Petrified.
So I can imagine if you roll him down a bar, and the air might fall off,
This guy again. Wow. That really is something, Stephen.
Well, for our listeners out there, if you have any experience with the Shamokin Head and would like to share it with us, please do on any platform, any social media, hit us up. We would love to hear your stories, and maybe we'll even talk about them on here. So
I'll be checking the comments.
yeah, exactly. And Dave Tamkus, thank you so much for being here today. We
Thanks.
really appreciate your time.
I appreciate you having me.
So much fun.
Putting us in your
Thanks for
schedule.
coming. All you foodies and ghoulies out there, if you want to reach out to us, email us about anything we talked about today, you can email us at sliceoftheparanormal@gmail.com, or you can look for us on your favorite social media platforms.
This podcast was produced by Stone State Entertainment.